So there's a huge new peace proposal for the Gaza Strip on the table, and it's coming from Donald Trump. Now, it's ambitious, it's definitely controversial, and over the next few minutes, we're going to break down what's actually in it, how it's supposed to work, and maybe most importantly, the massive roadblocks it's already facing. Let's dive right in. At the very heart of this thing is a really comprehensive 20-point structure. It's designed to tackle pretty much everything, from security and who's in charge, all the way to economic redevelopment. You can think of it as an attempt to create a complete architectural blueprint for a post-conflict Gaza. All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start with the big picture goals. Then we'll dig into the plan's 4 main pillars. After that, we'll see how it's actually supposed to get started. And finally, we'll get into the real-world reactions, roadblocks, and the central dilemma at its core. Okay, so what is this plan really trying to do? Before we get lost in all the details, let's just zoom out and look at the big picture. What's the ultimate vision driving this whole thing? It really all boils down to these 2 core objectives. These are the very first things mentioned in the plan. First, it's about security. The goal is to make sure Gaza can't pose a threat to its neighbors anymore. And second, it's about people, a full-scale reconstruction and redevelopment for everyone living there. Pretty much everything else in the proposal is built on top of these 2 big goals. Now, 20 points is a lot to take in. So to make it all easier to understand, we've grouped them into 4 key pillars that really form the foundation of the whole plan. And here they are: security, governance, the economy, and the long-term political future. Let's take a look at how the plan builds on each of these, starting with that first, really critical pillar, security. This is a huge piece of the puzzle. The plan calls for the complete dismantling of all military capability in Gaza, and this would be monitored by a new international stabilization force. But here's the key trade-off. In exchange for that demilitarization, the plan says it includes a solid commitment that Israel will not reoccupy or annex Gaza. So who would actually be in charge of Gaza? Well, the plan suggests a new transitional government made up of experts, technocrats, to handle all the public services. And overseeing all of that, a new board of peace, chaired by Trump himself. And you've got to pay attention to this part. Hamas is explicitly and completely cut out of any future role in government. Now, the economic vision here is just as big. The proposal wants to create a special economic zone, with better trade terms to really kickstart growth. There'd be an investment panel set up to bring in money and expertise from the outside, all aimed at rebuilding infrastructure and, this is the most important part, creating jobs for the people of Gaza. And this final pillar, it looks toward the future. It guarantees that nobody will be forcibly kicked out of Gaza, but it also says people should be able to leave and come back. It also includes ideas for interfaith dialogue, and this is significant. It holds out the possibility of a political horizon, which is basically a pathway towards Palestinian self-determination, maybe even statehood. But that's all hanging on the successful rollout of the rest of the plan. Okay, a plan is just a piece of paper without a process to make it happen, right? So how is this whole thing designed to even get off the ground? What are the very first steps? Now, what's really fascinating here is the sequence and, frankly, the speed. It all kicks off with a ceasefire that both sides agree to. But then an incredibly ambitious timeline starts, the return of all hostages within just 72 hours of Israel's public acceptance. That would then be followed by the release of Palestinian detainees, and only after all of that would the international force show up and the new government start to take shape. So we've seen the architecture of the plan on paper, but, any peace proposal lives or dies in the real world. So let's pivot now and look at the reactions and the very, very significant roadblocks this thing is already facing. And this right here is the fundamental problem, the starting point for any real talk about whether this can work. According to the source material, the Israeli government has given the plan a green light. Hamas, on the other hand, has not accepted it. And without both of the main parties on board, the whole thing is basically stuck in neutral. This quote from The Guardian just cuts right to the heart of it. The plan's 2 biggest demands on Hamas, that they completely demilitarize and totally give up any political power, are the very things that make it almost impossible for them to accept. This is the single biggest hurdle, period. And beyond that massive issue, critics have brought up a bunch of other serious concerns. That 72-hour timeline for hostage return, a lot of people see that as just not realistic. There are huge questions about whether an externally imposed government could ever be seen as legitimate. The idea of a Trump-led board being neutral is, of course, a major point of debate. And the plan kind of just pushes aside the other massive issues like the West Bank and Jerusalem, while somehow expecting it all to be enforceable in an environment of total distrust. So, after looking at the structure, the promises, and all the challenges, what's the bottom line? What's the central tension that's really at the heart of this entire proposal? And this is it, right here. On one hand, you have what might be one of the most detailed blueprints for Gaza's future that's ever been proposed. It's a full architectural plan. But on the other hand, a blueprint is completely useless if the two people you need to build the house can't even agree on where to lay the foundation. Which leaves us with this final critical question. This whole proposal is a top-down, externally driven effort to kind of engineer a solution from the outside. But if the actual parties on the ground, the ones who have to live with the results, don't even agree to its most basic ideas, can a plan like that ever truly be built? That, right there, is the ultimate challenge.